Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. We are going to be talking about Pikmin 3 Deluxe today, to my great delight. Embargo has lifted on the game in preview state, so while I can't review it for a little while yet, I can talk about it. I actually haven't talked much about Pikmin on this channel in the past, and that's because it is a series that has largely missed me for whatever reason. I did play the original Pikmin 3 on the Wii U, and you can check out my review of that on digitallydownloaded.net for my thoughts on what is basically the same game that you get here on the Switch. But other than that one game, I actually haven't played anything in the Pikmin series before. This is a series that is relatively less familiar to me. But I do think that that is only an issue of time and place, because I really like Pikmin as a franchise, as a property, as a game, and as a philosophy of game design. I really do like what Pikmin offers. So the aesthetic, for a start, is absolutely spectacular. Now, as anybody who follows me probably knows, I'm constantly railing against the obsession that this games industry has with its desperation to do adult realism in video games. To me, there is nothing particularly escapist about that approach. I enjoy The Witcher and Dragon Age and Skyrim and whatever other open world games and Sony blockbusters you can think of, but at the same time, the efforts of those games to create immersion by giving me something very believable, and thereby, as far as the developers are concerned, giving me the suspension of disbelief, it comes across to me as something that is rather pedestrian. I've never been fond of realism as an artistic direction because I think it ages. I think it is very limited in terms of its value because it is just for the here and now, and especially in video games as generations go on. So as we move into the next generation of consoles, for example, the realism that we're seeing in the video games now gets superseded very quickly, as opposed to something like Pikmin, where Nintendo can dust off the exact same game, port it to the next console, and it still looks every bit as engaging, enjoyable, and joyous as it did in the past. It is a very good-looking game for something that was released a generation ago. That aesthetic also means that Pikmin is a true flight of fancy. Having you wander around a world in which the mundane is giant in a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids kind of way is a very true kind of escapism. For the most part in Pikmin 3, you're tracking down fruit, as the juice from that fruit is necessary to survive, so you've got to keep your stock up, and turning something as simple as a lemon or an orange or a cherry into a major treasure and reward for playing well is just such a quaint, playful thing to do. Now, Nintendo regularly does this kind of thing with its games, of course, and it's certainly not exclusive to the Pikmin series, but increasingly Nintendo is the only one that does this, and it comes across as a relief to play. As I record this video, I've been playing this side by side with Baldur's Gate 3, and as somebody who has been waiting for 20 years for Baldur's Gate 3 and was really keen to actually start to play it, I do find myself much happier playing Pikmin 3 because it is not exactly the same aesthetic and tone as 20-30 other games that I've already played this year. Pikmin 3 stands out as something distinctive, interesting, and unique. One of the things that people will be wondering is how the dual screen setup of the Wii U has affected Pikmin 3 in its port to the Nintendo Switch. The good news is that it is perfectly fine. The game plays really nicely both in handheld mode and on TV, and having Pikmin 3 portable is certainly a nice thing. So if you've never played a Pikmin game before, you're in for a treat, and it's entirely possible the Pikmin series has only been a short one. It's been on the Wii and then the Wii U. And if you missed either of those consoles or just didn't pick the game up, then this may be your first chance to have a look at this series. And you don't need to have played the previous ones to enjoy Pikmin 3. It's standalone enough that it's got a couple of little nods here and there for series veterans, but it is certainly a standalone game in its own right. Basically, though, what you should be expecting is a giant environmental puzzle game with Metroid-like progression. That's the way that I would describe it. Other people describe it as a strategy game. I don't really think it's very strategic. You certainly need to be clever about how you overcome its puzzles, but it's not really about manipulation, I guess, of units so much as using them to solve the puzzles that the game throws at you. So what you do is collect up a growing range of Pikmin to overcome challenges in the environment. So for example, rock Pikmin can break glass, while yellow Pikmin can light dark caves by connecting a broken power cord together. The world is broken down into a number of different regions, and as you gain new Pikmin and abilities, you need to go back and forth to those regions, including ones that you've already completed, or at least spent time in, and open up new areas within them, while collecting treasures, battling bosses, and collecting plenty of fruit, and the end goal of the whole thing is to get off the planet in the end. Now, I'm not usually a fan of two features that are pretty major to Pikmin 3. I'm not a big fan of Metroid-like backtracking, and I don't like time limits. I don't like time limits because they put a pressure on you that stops you from enjoying the journey itself, and sometimes that works, but in a game like Pikmin, which is a kind of a very immersive, journey-orientated game, I would have thought, under normal circumstances, that those time limits would be at odds with what the rest of the game is doing. But I actually do like the time limits in Pikmin, and there's 2 of them. So you do need to keep finding fruit so that you have juice to consume as a daily timer, so each day is kind of broken, the game's broken down into journeys into the planet by day, and at the end of each day you need to consume some juice. If you run out of juice, then it's kind of game over. So you need to keep your stock up, and you do that by collecting fruit through the day. The other time limit is a day time limit. So you start off each day in the morning, and if you have not got all your Pikmin back to base, and you've taken off the surface of the planet to spend the night in the upper atmosphere, if you haven't done that by the time dark comes along, then monsters appear and it's not good for anybody. So you need to make sure that you're in safety by the end of the day. I like the juice timer because it gave you micro objectives to achieve and keep you focused on the day-to-day activities within the game as well. So it always felt like you were making some kind of progress whenever you got a fruit back to your base to turn into some juice. I also really liked the day timer because it added to the overall strategy of Pikmin, because I was constantly evaluating whether I had the time to explore an area or to complete a certain objective. If it was getting close towards the end of the day, I would need to reassess whether I should come back the next day to try, or really push my luck, and a couple of times I only just scraped back by the hair on my chin. The timer was just about out by the time I finished the objective. So that was certainly an exciting thing, and I really enjoyed that as a way of keeping the action moving and keeping the flow of the game nice and strong. The Metroid stuff I'm less fond of, and I'm still not fond of it in the context of Pikmin. Given that you are working on hard time limits, I don't like that I could forget about an area or obstacle that I needed to backtrack to once I had a new ability or type of Pikmin. And I would often do so because there's quite a lot of them. By the time you're exploring a couple of different areas, there's quite a lot to mentally remember, and I'm not particularly great at that in the context of Metroid games, so I would actually sometimes waste quite a bit of time, which can be very frustrating when you're working on timers, wandering around until I could discover what I had missed, rediscover it. But that's my only gripe with Pikmin 3. Overall, the game is such a delight, and one of the few Wii U titles that we were still waiting for a port to Switch. A lot of people missed out on this delightful little game thanks to the Wii U's commercial failure, and I do think that this will be a mild hit for Nintendo now, re-release or not, and it is a fairly standard re-release. It's a colourful breath of fresh air in a release window for 2020, where every other game that is of any kind of profile is trying to be oh so very serious. So from memory, the last 2 Wii U games we're waiting on now are Xenoblade Chronicle X, and I'm going to assume that it's going to be a 2021 release, given the popularity of that series, and Project Zero Maiden of Blackwater, or Fatal Frame as it's known in some places. I don't know why Nintendo has so little interest in that series, but I would consider a port of that one game unlikely at this stage, which is a pity because it's actually one of my favourite horror games of all time. But it is nonetheless quite unlikely. Anyway, that's on the side. This is it for this video of Pikmin 3. Thanks very much everybody for watching. Let me know what you think. There's a demo I think on the Switch so you can give it a go for yourself. And I hope you're enjoying it as much as I have. Please do hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss any of my videos, and please do consider backing me on Patreon because that will help me to grow my channel and do more stuff with it. Thanks very much as always for watching. Catch us on a stream later tonight. Otherwise, we'll see you at the end of the weekend. Have a good weekend, everybody.